Grudges keep us stuck in the past, and that impacts our leadership because we can't be present and clear in our decision making, interactions with others, and the actions that we take. In this video, I'm going to be talking about grudges, how to drop them, and how to pick up trust so we can actually rebuild the cultures around us. My name is Dr. Nina Ahuja. My mission is to help leaders create cultures of reliable respect by helping you learn to respond and not react when situations get really hard. When it comes to grudges, what is a grudge exactly? What's interesting is that on average, adults carry 6 to 7 grudges along with the resentment from those grudges. That's a lot of emotional load. A grudge then is an open emotional loop that is rooted in a feeling of having been wronged, feeling pain, feeling as though you've been treated unfairly or disrespectfully. It's just something that you feel has happened against you and you can't let it go. You keep thinking about it, you keep ruminating on it. It's the anger and frustration that's associated with it. It just stays with you. That's a grudge. Now, there can be short term grudges or long term grudges. A short term grudge is something like someone cuts you off on the highway and you're not happy with that person and you feel offended. Like, didn't you know I was right there? That could be an example of a short term grudge. Another one could be you write someone an email, they take a while to respond, and you're feeling kind of angry and resentful about the fact that they didn't get back to you sooner. That's another example. Then there's the long term grudge, where you've actually decided or made a decision or deduction about that situation or that person or circumstance. So, take, for example, the email, not receiving a response repeatedly. And then when you see the person being dismissed by that person, not feeling heard or seen, your opinions not being received, and everything you say in terms of feedback is received as an attack. Those repeated patterns of behavior may then turn into a longer lasting grudge where you've decided that this person, I just don't, I can't relate to them. They're not trustworthy. They don't know how to communicate well. They're not a good leader, as an example. That's an example of a longer term grudge. Now, when it comes to the experience of grudges, it's important to look at it from two different perspectives. There's the leader who has the grudge, and there's the team member or employee who has the grudge. And the reason that's important to delineate is because there are two different degrees of impact when it comes to those two different perspectives. As a team member, if you're holding a grudge against someone, there's an energy drain, which is common for the leader as well as an employee if they're experiencing a grudge. But in a team setting, it's more of an immediate impact around you. It comes down to the productivity, the tone, the morale within your team, and whether or not you achieve the goal that you're supposed to as a team. Now, that can have a ripple effect beyond the team to other teams that you're supposed to be integrating with. So it's not completely limited, but the scale of that impact is different than the case of a leader who's holding a grudge. The leader who's holding the grudge impacts at a very different scale. That leader is influencing the team to which they are leading, then also the unit, potentially the organization, depending on where that leader is in the organizational structure. The difference, though, is a leader sets the culture. And so if a leader is looking at their team members or is coming to a situation with a lot of resentment being held within them, that becomes a very different circumstance. A Trustpilot study, which is not a peer-reviewed study, but it was still interesting, they actually showed that on average, that adults carry 6 to 7 grudges within them. That's 6 to 7 layers and depth of emotional resentment or load that they're carrying into everything that they do. So that if we could even eliminate one grudge for the leader and then for each team member, for each administrative support staff, for each physician, for each patient, for each nurse, whatever context you're in, whether it be in healthcare or beyond in your organization, if you can get each person to drop one grudge, that's less of an emotional load that's coming to the table in the various interactions. It's less of a load that's coming taking you away from being able to really think about the circumstances and decisions you're making from a logical center because of what's happening in the brain, which is when you are feeling like you've been wronged, treated with disrespect, dismissed, whatever that experience is that has triggered your grudge, it triggers the alert center of your brain. It triggers that part of your brain which is responsible for your survival and protection. And I've talked about this in other videos in both the 3 R's framework video as well as the ripple effect. The importance of that is significant because if we're not able to pull ourselves out of that protective center of our brain because we're feeling offended in some way and we're holding a grudge, which may be short term or long term, having made a decision about something or formed a solid opinion about something, we're always going to be tending towards reacting instead of responding. So that if I've made a deduction about someone and said, I don't think they're trustworthy, every time I see that person, anything they say, I will be viewing through the lens of having deemed them not trustworthy. In the situation of the short term, we may not have that same impact because it's more of a passing thing. But when things happen repeatedly, even on a short term basis, but there's a pattern that establishes itself, that pattern and pathway gets wired into our brain. And so we become more reactive when we're dealing in that situation or with that person. The question then gets to be, how do we pull ourselves away from that to be able to let go of the grudge so that we're not completely and always reinforcing that pattern of thought where we don't trust that person, as an example? There are two key questions to ask that help close that emotional loop so that you're able to let go of the resentment that comes along with that grudge that has developed. Number one is to ask yourself, is it worth carrying the load of this grudge? When we have these negative feelings and we feel as though we need to maintain ourselves in protective mode, that is a drain on energy. And in doing so, that takes away our energy reserve in being able to deal with the other challenges we face in the project we're dealing with, in the patient interaction we're about to have, in the presentation we need to deliver, in the report that needs to be completed. Whatever that is, there's just less of an energy reserve. So the question of whether or not it's worth holding on to the grudge becomes really important because as busy as everyone is, and with the responsibilities that we carry, part of being able to maintain balance is about understanding how to uh, allocate our energy. That's not to say that grudges don't teach us lessons. Sometimes we're holding a grudge, we felt disrespected. Okay, there's something in there for us to learn. I don't like being treated this way. This is identifying a boundary for me. This is something that I'm learning about myself. That there's value to that grudge. But once you've learned the lesson, do we really want to hold on to that negative energy that continues to draw us down instead of being able to use that energy towards doing something positive and more productive? So that's the first question, is to ask yourself that. What value is it to you of holding that grudge? The second thing then comes to the other person. Oftentimes, as we've seen and as we've learned and as I expressed to you in the video on the ripple effect, we've all had experiences that we faced that have impacted us in different ways and have had emotional imprints in that center of our brain that deals with emotional processing and emotional memory. Depending on how deeply rooted those imprints are and how significant those experiences were that led to those imprints, we're going to be more or less driven by those past experiences, particularly when we're feeling like we're under pressure, we're under stress, the stakes are high, we're feeling backed into a corner. We're going to be heightened to begin with, so that if we feel offended in any way, we're going to be more likely to go into that protective center of our brain, which is more reactive. In order to understand that we have all had these experiences and to really realize that and to be able to let go of that grudge, it's important to then ask the question, when you did this, this is how I felt. Was that your intention? Can you please help me understand your context so that after you've asked yourself, is it worth holding on to this negativity? The second principle is to seek to understand. Ask the other person, was there a reason why you weren't able to send me an email sooner? This is how it made me feel. I don't know if that was your intention. I just appreciate understanding your perspective so I can help support you or so I can understand where you're coming from so that I can set my own expectations moving forward. Or in the case of, um, the leader where you're feeling attacked, if you have enough insight to be able to say, why am I feeling this way? Let me actually ask the person, what did they mean by that feedback? Where were they coming from? What was their experience that led them to that feedback? Again, that relies on self-awareness, which is a key competency in good leadership, as I've talked about before. If you're in a situation where the other person doesn't seem to have that, you can ask the question. The curiosity-driven approach is so important to resolving conflict, is so important to letting go of grudges. And if you're able to bring a calm, present mind to the table, that can help facilitate a discussion where you're responding, not reacting. And hopefully that ripple effect creates an environment where the other person will do the same. And sometimes that may not happen. We know that. But in many cases, as you've learned to develop this skill and ask the right questions and be able to mirror the other person as you need to, when you need to, you can actually help bring this all back together and help create a situation of mutual understanding, mutual respect, and then be able to let the grudge go and take the lesson away from it that you need to hold on to so that in the future you have a new set of expectations or just a new standard in how you communicate so that you can effectively relay your messages to one another compared to previous. So, holding grudges holds you in the past. To let them go, it is a decision that is made where you think about, is it worth holding on to this? Is it worth going through that open loop of emotion? Or can we close that open loop of emotion by asking questions to understand the other perspective, to draw us out of the emotional brain into the logic brain, which can then help reconcile the experience to then help settle the emotion so we can respond and not react and let go of that grudge. If you enjoyed this information, please like, subscribe, or share this video. That tells the platform that this information is valuable and helps increase reach. If you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any ideas or topics that you'd like me to cover, please put those in the comments as well. I read them all, and I look forward to bringing you more valuable content on how to respond and not react to help optimize your leadership. So thank you for taking the time to spend with me today.